Hey folks, this is Kalani. Our next round of content could be just around the corner. We have confirmation that we will be getting a patch 9.1.5, which is very exciting. There have also been a lot of buffs for various classes in PvP, some nerfs for the raid and quite a few dungeons, and a handful of rewards have been buffed up as well. Let's jump right in. First up this week, from recent data mining, it's all but confirmed that we will see a patch 9.1.5, which could include all manner of updates, and that means we also won't have to wait until patch 9.2, which could be quite far over the horizon, to get some updates into the game. A new file was found that references lure functions that will be depreciated in patch 9.1.5. So not only does this confirm that patch 9.1.5 is planned, but we might see some changes to how add-ons work as well. So now that we know 9.1.5 is on the way sometime in the near future, what could that patch actually include? I doubt we'll see any major features or content. That will probably be reserved to patch 9.2, but that doesn't mean we won't get anything interesting at all. The first thing on many players' minds would probably be Covenant restrictions. 0.5 patches are well known for having quality of life upgrades, and what could be more quality of life than opening up the Covenants? Pulling that ripcord would instantly open up so much extra content and so many new things to do for any player who hasn't swapped their Covenants this entire time. Can you imagine if you were suddenly able to freely change your Covenant and swap whenever you wanted? You could go from Nightfay to Venthyr to Kyrian all in the same week. You could work towards upgrading all of the various sanctums, collect all of the mounts, all of the transmog, and unlock and progress through all of the 4 different Covenant minigames. So much content is currently locked behind the Covenant choice, and it's a choice that many players just don't want to change because of the work involved in catching up and swapping back. If that huge restriction was lifted, it would open the floodgates for experimentation, different combinations, playing off specs with their preferred Covenant, or even trying out the underdog Covenants for your chosen spec or class and have a bit of fun. It's actually insane to me how much content has been split up by Covenants so far in Shadowlands, and we know that the ripcord exists. The dev team have more or less planned to do this at some point in this expansion. It's there, we all know about it, they're just waiting for the right time to pull it. Maybe it was planned for 9.2 or later on in 9.3 if they could get away with waiting that long, but why wait if the game is struggling? That ripcord could be part of the answer to address so many problems in Shadowlands so far. It just all depends on whether the dev team wants to make that move. This is probably the most requested quality of life change for the game right now, and patch 9.1.5 seems like the perfect place to put it in action. Speaking of Covenant, I wonder if we'll see any changes to how you progress through the Covenant storyline. It doesn't make a great deal of sense to work through the Covenant storyline after the Corthia storyline has already wrapped up, and even more so if you've already completed those Covenant campaigns on multiple characters. So there's the potential for the dev team to allow you to skip over some, or maybe even all of the Covenant campaign to let you get caught up on different characters, different Covenants, or on other alts. There are plenty of other Covenant-related restrictions in play too, like Conduit Energy. Conduit Energy feels like the kind of restriction that was initially implemented to be removed later on to free up a player's options and give them something else to work on. As it stands right now, you can't really experiment with multiple Conduit loadouts with your soulbinds, and even less so if you want to tinker with things while swapping specs. Removing Conduit Energy would open up that system and give players something else to spend their time on, and it seems like it would be incredibly easy to implement. Opening up the game for alts or returning players could be another option, making crafting the old ranks of legendaries easier or faster, allowing you to scrap, disenchant, or otherwise break down legendary items to let you recoup some of that currency to let you swap gear slots more easily. They could allow you to trade anima across characters to speed up alt sanctum progression. New events or bonuses to help players catch up in leveling. They could also do something with heirlooms, which has been a standard 0.5 patch feature for a while now. There's talk about maybe including Legion in the time walking rotation, and we could even see more heritage armor sets worked on again. There's actually a lot of different types of content that could be, and historically has been introduced in smaller 0.5 patches, so even if we won't get any story content or a new dungeon or a new raid, we could still see some fun stuff introduced. Now, saying that, I actually wouldn't be too surprised if we saw some minor story content, either to wrap up the few loose ends that we have in Shadowlands right now, maybe explore how each Covenant is handling the loss of the Arbiter and the return of the Jailer's full power, and what they think of the Jailer's plan. Maybe we work with each Covenant to see what little scraps of info they each know about the mysterious place the Jailer has gone to, and put it all together to maybe get a glimpse into the future. Or the patch could set up the next chapter of the story, because right now, we don't have too much to work with besides Jailer is bad and Jailer is in a place we don't want Jailer to be. Finding out just a bit more about where the Jailer has gone and what he can actually do there might help the story flow a bit better in the future. We know that the Jailer plans to rewrite reality somehow in this new location, but what if we actually saw that starting to happen? What if we saw small parts of our world or the Shadowlands change as the Jailer starts to figure out how the power of the First Ones works? That would be a chance to introduce some new content, but also make it really obvious that he's tampering with some seriously powerful stuff, which would in turn create a sense of urgency for working on a way to stop him. I guess a sense of urgency wouldn't make too much sense if 9.2 is super far away, but this could also be a chance to include small changes to the game a bit at a time, all the way up to patch 9.2's release. That would be really fun and interesting, in my opinion. But you know what I would really love to see in patch 9.1.5? The ability to skip over any part of the story you can't already skip and you've already completed, including, and probably most importantly, the more intro questline. I'm kind of shocked you still have to go through this on every ult, and I know it doesn't take that long, and I know it gives you a level or so and it's kind of whatever, but at this point for me it's just too boring. Having to sit there and wait for Jaina to plod around and talk about the Jailer for the 10th time just isn't worth it to me, so all the ults I haven't gotten through it yet probably just won't go through it, so a skip for that specific sequence would be wonderful. Now, one of the biggest questions would be, when could we see patch 9.1.5? Well, it might be sooner than you think. The last chapter of the Courtier campaign was released this week, and we got to see how things wrap up, sort of. We didn't really get any new information this week, and we didn't get any answers to all of the questions floating in the air, but what we do know is that we won't see anything new in patch 9.1 from this point onwards. The patch is pretty much done, so it's time to look ahead once more, and if patch 9.15 is mainly focused on quality of life upgrades, lifting a few restrictions, implementing new tools, updating the list of evergreen content, you know, typical 0.5 patch stuff, then it could appear on the PTR very soon, and assuming nothing breaks horribly, the patch itself could release soon after that. If there's no real content to test, the testing cycle should be much faster, and we could have patch 9.15 in our laps before you know it. One potential indicator for a release timeline could be the current Renown grind. With the story and campaign for patch 9.1 wrapped up, we're back to a maximum of 2 Renown per week, one from the weekly Anima quest and one from the weekly Courtier quest. With only 2 Renown earnable per week, we should max out our Renown and hit level 80 in 10 more weeks, which should put us around about October 19th if I can do math at least somewhat correct. That's not too far away in the grand scheme of things, and I would expect 9.15 to have released by that point, so patch 9.2 can start its testing cycle ASAP, so we might have a new patch to look forward to in the not too distant future, which should hopefully contain some nice quality of life upgrades if nothing else. Personally, I think patch 9.15 will arrive sooner rather than later, and I think the overall plan would probably be to get patch 9.2 released before the end of the year, around the holidays, or if they can't quite make that deadline, then definitely right after the new year. To prioritize 9.2, they would need to get 9.15 out ASAP, and with it being a smaller patch, they actually wouldn't have to figure out 100% of the patch right away. If something is delaying the patch significantly, they could just cut that out of 9.15 and package it alongside 9.2. Basically, I think they would prioritize getting the patch out faster rather than making it a big patch, especially if it contains some of these more interesting quality of life upgrades we touched on earlier. Now, in other news, we saw quite a few nerfs to one of the largest walls in the Sanctum of Domination raid, Painsmith Raznal. Now, these changes are for Mythic only, which shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. Mythic Painsmith is a huge wall to overcome for a lot of guilds that managed to get there, so these nerfs should be very welcome. First off, a gap will now appear in every row of spikes during stage 2 of the fight, so no more full rows of spikes that you have to cheese your way past by blinking, gating, bopping, all that wonderful stuff. So phase 2, or the intermission phase, should be more or less just like heroic mode going forward. And then Painsmith Raznal, the Spike Balls, and the Shadow Steel Horror ads have all had their health reduced by 10%, which should make it much easier to pass the various DPS checks and avoid the enrage, as well as make killing balls and ads much faster in general. It also helped with the last burn phase because there will be a little bit less health to go through, and with all of these nerfs in place, a lot more guilds should be able to clear through Painsmith Raznal and move on to some of the other bosses. It's curious to see how many nerfs have come through for this raid on Mythic difficulty so far. Usually the big nerfs, especially for the harder bosses, start trickling in when the new patches and new content are in the pipeline. Castle Nathria didn't see too many big nerfs for a very long time, and that was potentially because it ended up being a very long tier. With nerfs already coming through for Sanctum of Domination, that might mean that the dev team believes they can get a new patch to us relatively soon, or at the very least start testing it sometime in the near future. I would expect to see some patch 9.2 info shortly after patch 915 pops up onto the PTR, or maybe just after 915 goes live. It's not just the raid that's been tweaked and changed though, a few dungeons have seen quite a few nerfs as well. In the other side, the Enraged Spirit's rage duration was reduced to 5 seconds, down from 6 seconds. This should make surviving that particular trash mob at least a bit easier going forward. In Halls of Atonement, the completion timer has been increased to 32 minutes, up from 31 minutes, so you have a whole extra minute to finish your Halls of Atonement Mythic plus Keystones in time. The second boss also saw a minor nerf. Echelon Stone Shattering Leap damage was reduced by 15% in Mythic and Mythic Plus difficulties, so again that should be easier to survive more reliably. In Mists of Tierna Sight, the first boss has seen a few changes as well. First, the duration of Dromon's Wrath, that's when the tree dude is broken free and gives the main boss the big damage debuff. The duration has been increased to 15 seconds, up from 12 seconds, so you get an extra 3 seconds of extra burst damage, which should reduce the length of the encounter by quite a bit. The dev team also made a change to prevent the boss from casting his AoE Fear, Repulsive Visage, when Dromon is at 25% health or less, so basically the boss will never fear you right as the damage debuff phase starts, which will increase overall uptime on the boss, and with the extra 3 seconds of nukage, this boss should be quite a bit easier. Over in Plaguefall, the slimy morsels that Plague Belchers summon have had their health reduced by 50%, making them much easier and faster to kill, and just because the slimy morsels are overall apparently too slimy, the ads that Globgrog summons have also had their health reduced by 30%, which is nice and makes killing them more viable I guess, but I haven't really killed those ads in a very long time if I'm honest, but the nerf is still nice. Sanguine Depths has seen a few changes too. The Gluttonous Tick ads will now lose any stacks of Engorge they have when they leave combat, so if you wipe to these bloodthirsty little suckers, they should reset properly to give you a better chance when you re-engage them. The Infused Quill Feather ads will also no longer trigger on-death affixes such as Bolstering and Sanguine, making them much easier to deal with as well. And then the first boss, Crixus the Voracious, has been nerfed slightly too. His Juggernaut Rush ability has had its damage reduced by 20%, making that much easier to survive in general, even if someone decides not to help you soak. Necrotic Wake has seen a very quick nerf. Surgeon Stitchflesh has had his health reduced by 10%, so killing him before he runs away too many times will be at least 10% easier, especially if you save some of those shiny weapons for him. And last but not least, the Theatre of Pain will see a few changes too. The Affront of Challengers boss has been nerfed in 2 ways. The one with death buff that gives the bosses an absorption shield has been reduced to 20% of the boss's max health, down from 30%, so if you absolutely have to break that shield for whatever reason, well, now it should be faster and easier to do. And then Desia the Decapitator's slam damage has also been reduced by 40%, making that significantly less deadly, especially when combined with everything else going on in the fight. So lots of nerfs across many of the Shadowlands dungeons, which should make your Mythic Plus Keystone adventures a bit easier overall. There have also been quite a few balance changes over on the PvP side of the game. For the Death Knights, their Rune of the Fallen Crusader will no longer have its strength bonus reduced in PvP, and it was previously reduced by a whopping 33%, so Death Knights can look forward to the full power of their Fallen Crusader buff going forward. For Unholy specifically, Necrotic Wounds debuff duration has been increased to 15 seconds, up from 12 seconds, so you get an extra 3 seconds of rotting your opponents from the inside out. Hunters are on this list as well. Arcane shot damage has been increased by 9% in PvP situations, and that goes for every spec by the look of things. And then for marksmanship hunters, aim shot damage has been increased by 10% in PvP situations, so watch out for the hunters next week. They're going to be dealing quite a bit more damage. For the Mistweaver monks, mana regeneration will be reduced by 30% in PvP situations, down from 40%, so that's actually a buff that gives Mistweaver a bit more of their mana regen back while they're PvPing. Renewing Mist's healing has been increased by 10% in PvP situations, and then Vivify healing has also been increased by 10% in PvP situations, and Brewmaster and Windwalker healing will remain unchanged. So quite a few buffs for the healing monks out there. And then we come to the Warlocks. What a list this is. The Demon Armor PvP talent max health bonus was increased to 10%, up from 5%. Agony damage, corruption damage, and siphon life damage have all been increased by 15% in PvP situations, and Shadowbolt damage has been increased by 10% in PvP situations as well. I guess Affliction Warlocks just weren't kicking out enough damage, because that's quite a tasty round of buffs to the damage over time Warlock spec. All of these changes go live with the next weekly reset, so again Tuesday for North American realms and Wednesday for European realms. Are there any PvP changes in here that you're looking forward to, or any that you strongly disagree with? Let me know in the comments below. And then we also have some buffs for something a bit weird. Stygia rewards. The more daily quests will now reward 2 times the Stygia they did previously, and the chance for Stygia to be a reward has been increased by 15%. So if you still need some extra Stygia, maybe because you didn't have any stockpiled from the patch before, or you just spent it all willy-nilly, but now you really want those Death's Advance mounts or whatever else still costs Stygia, now it should at least be a bit faster and more reliable to earn from the more daily quests. I thought it was a bit odd that the more daily quest Stygia rewards were nerfed going into patch 9.1, but I guess the dev team didn't want Stygia to be too easy to obtain, seeing as they were going to continue using it as an important currency, even though they said they weren't going to. I don't know. But if you still need some Stygia, that's a nice buff for you to look forward to. And then the last nugget of news we have for this week revolves around conduits, and specifically the items that upgrade your conduits. A blue post mentioned that there will be a change with the next weekly reset, so Tuesday for North American realms and Wednesday for European realms, that changes how the conduit upgrade items work. Both the Soul Twining Crescent and the Deathbound Shard will now grant conduits based upon your current specialization, instead of just randomly picking one for your whole class. So if you're a Fire Mage, you should get Fire Mage conduits only. If you're a Windwalker Monk, you should get Windwalker conduits only, etc, etc. This is a huge change, and honestly something that should have been implemented already, or even implemented from the very beginning, but I guess better late than never. Now the blue post doesn't explicitly mention whether or not these items will target spec-specific conduits for their upgrade factor as well, but I would certainly hope that would be the case. So now you should be able to hyper-focus on one specific spec to get your conduits unlocked and upgraded, without having to worry about the other specs conduits getting in the way. And as an extra little bonus, they also said they would be increasing the drop rate of the Deathbound Shard item when completing the Adamant Vaults in Torghast. So if you haven't been running Adamant Vaults because the lower drop rate wasn't worth it to you, that might be something to look into in the future. A free conduit upgrade for some time spent in Torghast isn't too bad, especially if you're farming for other things in Torghast at the same time. But that's all of the news for this week in WoW. What do you think patch 9.15 will include? Is there anything you're hoping for specifically, and restrictions that you would love to see lifted? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon, and to everyone who's subscribed on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.